anyone, I mean, maybe with a few exceptional cases, people maybe who have mental disorders, I'm not being funny, I mean that, I think most of us want to thrive. We all want to live satisfying lives. So I find it very hard to justify, you know, if I expect to have the opportunity to live a satisfying life, or to at least, you know, to have the opportunity to forge a satisfying life for myself, I find it hard to try to come up with any argument as to why I shouldn't expect other people to have the same desire. Oh, thanks.
Okay. If you would concede that the concept of harm is morally bad and morality is derived from God, how can you account for the frequent harm elicited by God or explicitly instructed to be done by him in the Bible? For example, Job, Isaiah, etc.
Well, I think that all of us can recognize that, for example, there's a difference between me taking it upon myself to take the life of an innocent person, or a governing body taking the life of the innocent person in means of capital punishment, for instance. I think that that's readily discernible, that there are differences. There's different modes of taking a life. And if there's a governing body that decides that it has the authority to take a life, it's in a different category altogether. And that when we're talking about God giving us the life, he may very well decide that there's a certain time to take it. And I think that's what we're dealing with there.
Okay, question for both of you. Wars of aggression and territorial conflict seem to belie the universal claim that harm is wrong, per se. There seems to be the counterclaim from the evidence that harm is beneficial, or at least useful for the in-group. How would you comment on that?
Yeah, from what I've read, that's actually true. So if the third moral domain, which is one of them that only half of us tend to believe in or feel is a moral domain, is in-group loyalty. And it's inevitable that the other side of the coin is out-group hostility. I remember once someone saying to me, you know, you have to admit, everyone is a little bit racist, or everyone just feels better around their own kind. And I had a hard time with this. I thought, no, that's not true. Psychologists have shown it, and we've seen it in woodland chimps. Sam Bowles did a lot of studies on them. The fact is, we're this kludge of motivations which got us to where we are, but because of our higher intellect, we can now say, you know what? In-group loyalty and out-group hostility was beneficial when we were in small groups, but we're at a point, I think, in the world now where we can say, look, we don't need in-groups anymore. There should be one big in-group. That's my opinion on that.
I would state that based on the concept that we're all created in God's image, I simply have no right to violate you, period. And so when we consider harm, that's why we recognize it as something wrong. That's why we could recognize it as something that ought not be done. Because made in God's image means we all have this in common, and we have the extrinsic moral value and human value and dignity and worth of which I spoke. It's extrinsic, and it comes from without. And that is why we have no right to treat each other in that way. We may do it, but that's why we recognize it and agree that it's wrong.
This is a question for Mariano. In the time before God's will was revealed, say 10 or 20,000 years ago, did objective morality exist, and how could humans exist at this time? Humans existing at this time know objective morality.
So it seems to be a two-part question. One, if I may. Well, I suppose I'd like to, the question asked about before God's will was revealed, and I suppose I'd like to ask when, in this view, when that occurred. Because we have from the very beginning God's will, not only from without but from within, so keep that in mind. God's will, God's moral nature has always been within us. So there was no time when there was sort of no guidance whatsoever. And so on this view, atheist, theist, anyone in between has that within them and is affected by it, whether or not they recognize God, whether they or not they believe in God or not. It's there. Well, now, when it comes to how could humans exist at this time, how could we today know objective morality, you know, I don't see that there's a silver bullet question, a sort of simple phrase. I mean, it's obvious that it's a combination of factors, most certainly. And that's why I could not help but agree with much of what Michael said, because there are the various factors that come into play. And there's no doubting that. There's no need to. It's always been there. But the main thrust is that there's something behind all of it. There's something behind all of it. For instance, if we say it mattered not that most of the Germans during Nazism agreed that harm was right, we can't very well say we know they're wrong because we can all agree that harm is wrong. I mean, well, they disagreed, so we can't say that we all agree because they didn't. So that, again, there's something behind and beyond that that makes it wrong. And it's not just, and on this particular little point in a box that we agree that it's absolute.
Okay, question that we tried to avoid in the debate, I know, but here it is. They write them, I have to say them. Why do you think there isn't a God? And do you honestly believe that everything we are is by chance?
I have absolutely no idea how the universe came into being. I wasn't there. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a biologist. I do not know why everything that exists exists. However, my problem with the God did it explanation is that if you argue that there's just too much complexity, it is just too amazing that it just happened, well, is it not logical that God would have to be even more amazing in order to have created all this? Therefore, God would be even less likely. If the universe couldn't have just come about because it's too incredible, well then the creator of it would have to be even more incredible. So there's this infinite regression. So the God did it explanation is not an explanation at all. I mean, sure, I'm 99% sure God doesn't exist. I mean, can I absolutely know for sure? No. If I thought I knew for sure, I wouldn't be rational. But at the same time, I also don't think it's rational to believe it's probable. So I'm comfortable living my life as though he does not exist.
Question for two of you. Well, actually, one at a time, and they're counter questions. So I'll read them both at once, and then you go. Michael, in the absence of God, what is the purpose of morality, and what makes it objective? And Mariano, in the presence of God, what is the purpose of morality, and what makes it objective? I'll leave that there so you can sort of.
Where's the purpose of morality? Well, ultimately, of course, the question presupposes God's existence in the presence of God. What is the purpose of morality, and what makes it objective? What makes it objective is that it's derived from God's essence, his character, his very being. God is by very nature a relational, benevolent, and moral being. That's what makes it objective. And the purpose is just to enjoy those relationships with each other, with the environment, with animals. That's the purpose. That's why compassion is enjoined upon us. That's why it's enjoined upon us to view each other as being related, as being special, as being extrinsically special. And that's really the purpose, is to enjoy these relationships that we can have with members of our own species or otherwise.